trying to box them into a confined area of airspace. The military gondola itself, in the case of Roswell, basically blew over Corona. The gondola separated from the triple dirigible system, and that eventually crashed into San Augustine on the plains of near Socorro, New Mexico, and aspects of the craft, of course, wound up on Billy Mac Brazel's ranch. The bodies themselves were spotted lying about the gondola, and were ultimately identified by Dr. Curry Holden, who was a Texas Tech archaeologist who was leading students on a exploratory expedition. He was threatened, and his students were threatened in terms of in terms of the female who spotted the one survivor who had burns all over his body, who was being beaten by MPs. He was holding the black box of the craft at that time. I believe her name was Gerald Anderson. So all of this did indeed happen. And the great misfortune of it is that nobody really understood what they were saying, and the government, of course, was in no mood to help them. Military men were securing the area, and ultimately the bodies were shipped to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The coffins were requested, and the rest, as they say, is history. Now, McGinty asks a germane question concerning kamikaze activity. He says, wasn't that a sign of desperation? Well, this exhibits a real lack of understanding of Japanese culture, and it really ignores what Americans in their rational and materialist society at that point in history did not comprehend at all. And in so not comprehending, they dismissed what they saw as some kind of empty fanaticism, desperation. That is a cultural interpretation. That is a filter. Again, we are speaking of something that was premeditated and impacted even my father quite personally. In terms of the inspiration for the kamikaze, what had happened was that literally over 700 years ago, in May of the year 1281, the Mongolians invaded Japan with a fleet that has never been equaled in mankind's history until the invasion of D-Day. The Mongolians invaded Japan using Chinese technology and Korean ships. Now, the Koreans had the first ironclads long before the American Civil War, so we're speaking of armored ships numbering 4,400 right off the coast of Japan. Now, Japan and Korea are extremely close together. Right. This doesn't appear to be such a close proximity on this map, but literally, if you're in Korea and you drink a can of beer and you throw it away on the beach, it will wash up on a Japanese beach. In Japan, if you do the same, it may wash up on a Korean beach, most likely depending on the currents. But they are extremely close together. So close that Korea has always been the dagger pointed at the heart of Japan, and has always been considered the Poland of Asia, in the sense that it's the route through which the Chinese and Japanese invade each other the way the Russians and the Germans do over the Polish freeway. So in terms of the invasion, Kublai Khan was not being irrational when he used armored riverboats, because the distances are so close between Japan and the mainland that doing so would normally have proven successful. The Koreans had incorporated Chinese explosive weapons, so they actually had artillery that could bombard the Japanese coast and explode in midair, spreading shrapnel all over the samurai who were defending the coast. So at the point when the 4,400 ships attacked, they basically had the total upper hand technologically in terms of manpower, and the emperor at that time could only get on his knees and pray. And his prayers were answered because what had happened was a typhoon emerged, known as the divine wind in Japan, or the kamikaze.